Yo, what it do, theorists? Are y'all happy now? Nah, just kidding. But we really do read them comments, so we know how much y'all wanted this one. Brad Jordan, aka Mr. Scarface, aka your favorite rapper's favorite rapper. Face has to be one of the game's most revered legends. Well, today we give him his overdue flowers while he still can smell them. If you haven't already done it, be sure to give his 11 albums a deep dive and tell us how we did. If you liked the video, hit the button so the algorithm will know. Subscribe if you haven't. We're trying to hit 20K subs. And if our top 3 matches yours, you might as well hit that super thanks. Read minds ain't cheap. All right, let's get it. Number 11, My Homies. There's a short list of artists who can command an audience attention for nearly 2.5 hours. 98 Scarface definitely isn't on it. No, really, he isn't even on the album. With 15 of My Homies' 30 tracks not containing any Face Mob vocals, hitting the shuffle button gives you a 50-50 chance of hearing the H-Town vet. Fans of the channel probably could have placed a bet on where this album landed in our rankings. But can you blame us? We know the project would be a commercial success, peaking at number 4 on Billboard 200, but the redeeming tracks are so far and few between that you might be better off avoiding the album altogether. Okay, maybe not a complete wash. Homies and Thugs with Master P and Tupac definitely rolled, as well as Fuck Faces with Too Short, Tila, and Devin the Dude. I think we found a general trend with these ambitiously excessive tapes. If you're a good artist, chances are your double album will probably be mediocre. Great artist, it may be good, but only the most iconic artists can turn around a classic double disc project. At least that's what we thought, but we'll come back to that. We're sure nobody would argue Face's place among the game's greatest, with his classic count being somewhere between 3 and 6, depending on the circle you find yourself in. So why couldn't that consistency and creativity translate into a semi-serviceable LP? There are a number of factors, but we'll chalk it up to song selection and quality control. Normally with a regular LP, artists get between 10 to 15 songs to identify whatever mood they want to instill in the audience and follow through. Some songs will get lost in the process, but those are always exceptions, never the rule. But when artists have little to no restrictions on a project's length, they would rather overcrowd their plate and waste food than get up later for seconds. Would either portion of this album be ranked higher had they been 2 separate projects? Probably not, but their respective flaws wouldn't be so glaring. Secondly, quality control. One of the benefits of a more limited track list lie in the structure the album needs to follow to determine their themes. If I only give you $10 for lunch, you're gonna start getting real creative with your ingredients. Point is, if you include 30 songs for one album, we can tell you there will be pacing issues, feature fatigue, and a range of clashing subjects before we even cue up the first song. Face has features from Pac, P, Ice Cube, UGK, Too Short, and at least 10 other rappers you haven't heard from since, because his loyalty for his rap peers outweigh his selectivity when attaching his name to projects. He's only got 2 solo tracks on the whole tape. Man, talk about a head fake. Number 10, My Homies 2. One thing you can expect from a Culturalist Theory video is consistency. Unlike its predecessor, we actually enjoyed about half of this album. Percentage-wise, we'd probably even rank it ahead of our number 9 spot. While we would rather build around tracks like The Corner, Gotta Get Paid, and Problems, the filler we have to dig through puts this one behind the 8 ball. Most MCs aren't fearless enough to double down on a double disc. Brad Jordan is the exception. When we saw Scarface revisited the lowest point of his career and potentially made the same mistake twice, we were expecting nothing short of a career-ending injury. Metaphorically speaking, of course. While we were shocked by some of the cuts that would encompass Face's 8th studio album, we weren't too far off. We're glass half full kind of people, so we'll start off with what he did right. We don't know what finesse he had to pull off to throw platinum stars on this project despite not having any vocals on the track, and even more shockingly, the song was already released on Chamillionaire's The Truth from the Ground Up mixtape. Including the track wasn't just chess, it was checkmate, one of the rare times you'll see Bun B outshine on a song, despite having a 30-point performance of his own. The visceral storytelling on Gotta Get Paid could have been the building block for its own album. Face Mob grabbed the remix to The Corner, Scarface, Common, and Mos Def on the same song. Sign us up. Not only will we get a new and improved verse from Common Sense, but we added a Kanye and Mos Def collab joint to our wish list. Can't forget the unofficial sequel to I Seen a Man Die titled Man Cry. Features from Cube, Game, and Pimp C also helped to solidify the album as a clear progression from the first installment. How does the saying go? If you don't have anything nice to say, I guess this will be the point where we skip to the next album. Number 9, Ameritus. Scarface is certainly not an artist who got stuck in an era. While his efforts to keep up with hip-hop's shifting soundscape range from admirable to genius, the restrictive production on Face's 10th studio album had him looking like Russ with the Lakers. Ameritus ironically finds Face at his most braggadocious, despite being the only person to show up for for the project, kind of like Russ with the Clippers. Granted, Face's longevity at this point was a flex in itself. We just wish he was talking like this on Made instead. Initially stated to be his last album, Face's perceived farewell tour debuted at number 24 behind 42K in its first week. The album would receive an outpouring of love from critics, with many giving it numbers comparable to his best work. You won't hear us disagree with critics' love often, but our feelings on the album couldn't have been more diametrically opposed. This is Brad Jordan we're talking about, so of course there are diamonds in the rough. His performance on the title track is proof that lyricism and delivery supersede relevancy. Face enlisting Tucci and Bun on Forgot About Me is one of the rapper's more prevalent instances of shock and awe. With Tucci hotter than the surface of the sun, and familiar Face and Rap-A-Lot teammate Bun B, Scarface continually reminds us that he's our favorite rapper's favorite rapper. We hear some of that influence on the album's title track. Face's demeanor on the mic with calm and collective flows gave us Black Thought freestyle vibes about 5 years ahead of its time. There are some familiar names behind the board, but none of the piano-driven, soul-influenced middle-aged rap that Scarface not only introduced, but basically perfected. We know past iterations of Jordan would have been a home run with Belial, but Can't Get Right fails to capture that same elder on the stoop energy from The Fix. Luckily, Face wouldn't hang it up just yet, leading to our next album. Number 8, Deeply Rooted. Face's first album since The Fix, not released through Rap-A-Lot. If Deeply Rooted is Jordan's exit from the game, it was a triumphant one. Is it his best work? Far from it, but it serves two purposes. It reminds Mr. Scarface fans of what the rapper was capable of when all the cards were on the table. But it also gives newer fans the chance to stumble upon one of the most impactful rappers to ever touch a mic. Released less than 3 months after Apple Music's launch, the rapper's 11th studio album was his first major project of the streaming era, and it was clear that the album's accessibility would have long-reaching implications for rappers on the back end. The album would include flashes of what we've always gravitated towards in Face's music, specifically his knack for collaboration, propensity for storytelling, and ability to touch the soul. You're probably sitting there like, if he's hitting like that, why is the album sitting so low? Bigger picture, Face has accomplished a lot, and his discography reflects these achievements. While he does have glimpses of past success, the consistency that made these traits a given is nowhere to be found. For every stroke of brilliance we get, there's a smear of inconsistency. Steer wouldn't have been a good move for Eminem, and he was only a degree of separation away from dubstep status. Why Face thought he could swerve into EDM from gangster rap, we don't know. It does, however, reinforce Face's habits of prioritizing his ambitions over his execution, but we're not terribly mad at it. Reuniting for the first time since In Between Us, Face and Nas tap Ross and Zero for Do What I Do. Are we greedy for still wishing for some bars from Bun before the beat cuts out? We love the flow switch on Keep It Moving, signifying Brad's strong finish on a potential final album. Fingers crossed there's more left in the tank. I mean, after hearing him on All Bad, we could definitely wrap our heads around an unofficial sequel to The Fix. We'd even argue that he was going for that energy throughout this very project. If All Bad and Do What I Do aren't spiritual successors to On My Block and Guess Who's Back, then they gotta be country cousins. A sequel titled The Habit was supposedly in the works. Only habit we got is a bad one of believing these rumored projects. Number 7, Made. Do y'all know cosmetics is a billion-dollar industry? We spend immeasurable amounts of money running from old age. You would think we would have found a way to stop the aging process by now. Luckily, we still grow and age. If we're good at it, we might even learn a thing or two. Things along the lines of,
I keep shit 100, not a game, this is real life. To die young's an honor. You get old, you live twice.
This must be what they mean when they say life is the greatest teacher. Exemplifying grown man rap, Face delivers the kind of wisdom rap has always needed. We get rich, borderline lifelike storytelling with Suicide Note. Seriously, we need to start the conversation. Brad Jordan has to be one of hip-hop's most slept-on storytellers. N.O. Joe and Drummer Boy had no business cooking up Never Like That, had Face sounding more rejuvenated at 37 than he was at 27. From the themes and imagery to their respective ages and places in their careers, we think Made and American Gangster are perfect examples of regional overlap. Unfortunately, it might also be the difference in their attention to detail. Case in point, who do you believe in? On the surface, the song probes familiar subjects like organized religion, incarceration, and the dynamics of street life. But it's that surface level examination that halts the album from moving up in the ranking. As is a common theme with Face Mob projects, critics had nothing but love for this one. While he would see some moderate success on the R&B charts with the album's only single, Girl You Know, Untouchable, featuring a young Trey Songz. The album itself saw Face drop 5 spots on the chart since My Homies Part 2 almost 2 years prior. We don't really drop the disclaimer anymore, but all of our rankings are judging albums by their standard versions. That being said, who heard the bonus tracks on this one? B-Word and Crack did nothing for us, but that remix to Big Dog Status, Tip did his thing as usual. Not sure why him and Face never dropped anything canon, but at least we can hear them sharing the same space. Kinda. In a rare turn of events, we get a whiff from Wayne. Can't even sugarcoat it, it's just a forgettable feature. Is it weird that we low-key think the missed feature only adds to Brad's hype? We expect Wayne to snap by default at this point, so finding an outright miss is like finding a misprint on a dollar bill. It makes it more valuable. And if anybody could survive a bad Wayne verse, it would be Jordan. Luckily, the two would run it back for 08's Forgot About Me. While we can't quite call Made a must listen, from this point on, it's all essential Face. Number 6, The Untouchable. After 3 stellar solo releases and a respectable 90s output from the Geto Boys, Mr. Scarface would earn his first and currently his only album to top the Billboard 200. Selling 169,000 its first week, The Untouchable is Face at his most commercially successful. Don't confuse it for selling out though. OG fans get some of his best slappers with joints like No Warning, Faith, and Mary Jane, while fans who are on the fence will be pleasantly surprised by his transition into G-Funk. Despite entrenching himself deep into the South's gangster rap sound, Face seamlessly joins forces with Tupac, Dr. Dre, Ice Cube, and Too Short to deliver his most regionally diverse project to date. Speaking of regions, in response to the anthemic success of Dre and Pac's California Love, rappers everywhere wanted anthems of their own. Here we get that in the form of Southside, Face's affirmation of his undying love for the South. With hip-hop and its listeners trying their hardest to alienate the South, Face Mob and Rap-A-Lot served as one of the few beacons of undeniable success, demonstrating that
the South got something to say, that's all I got to say.
In addition to his highest charting album, The Untouchable would also sport Face's most successful single. Linking up with Pac and Johnny P, Scarface remixes Pac's previously released Smile For Me Now off the Death Row Greatest Hits album. Anybody watch that eerie-ass video directed by Paul Hunter, seemingly depicting the deaths of Pac and Biggie? According to Jay Prince in a 2018 interview with Rap Radar, he reached out to Puff to enlist Big's help on the song. Once he heard that Pac was gonna be on it, he shut the collab down. We know this conversation is older than dirt at this point, but when are we gonna realize these beefs are only as big as the surrounding instigators? Sorry about that tangent, but Puff really robbed us of Biggie and Face on wax, the combo we didn't even know we needed until now. Despite having 3 platinum albums and another 3 gold certifications, Smile would peak with a single gold certification. We just can't believe though through all of these critical and commercial achievements, Face has never had a platinum single under his belt. We saw a graphic comparison of James Harden and Robert Horry with the question being posed, would you rather have $300 million in the bank and no championships, or 7 rings and $50 million? You know we had to flip it. Would you rather have classic albums under your belt with minor commercial success, or commercial successes with nothing to show for your legacy? You know what to do down in the comments. Number 5, The World Is Yours. Brad's 5-year run leading up to his sophomore LP is the stuff of legend. Forever altering Southern hip-hop with We Can't Be Stopped, Face would feed the fans just 3 months later with his debut, Mr. Scarface Is Back. It goes without saying, Face struggled with one of the earliest sophomore slumps in rap. Not many artists had enjoyed the level of success Scarface had achieved by '93. We're talking the eventual godfather of your region type success. So while The World Is Yours saw Face moving way more units, the concrete impact of the album wouldn't be felt for decades. Teaming to explore the next iteration of Houston's sound, Scarface and N.O. Joe cooked up the first batch of gumbo funk we've ever heard. Face's blend of production and delivery on Let Me Roll sees him as the exception to the rule, being one of the few in his peer group to successfully roll out a smoker's anthem while being renowned for his lyricism and subject matter. We know that Pac met Scarface through UGK, but we didn't hear his influence on Pac until we came back to Now I Feel You. Face's reflective storytelling, transparent outlook on his life and music, and ability to reach listeners would be lessons Pac and DMX would study in droves, rolling out joints like I Ain't Mad At You, So Many Tears, and Slippin'. We're not saying Scarface is solely responsible for their vulnerability. We know poetry was integral for Pac and Pac was integral for X, but once Scarface opened the door to be emotional, who was gonna close it? Even I'm Black eerily mirrored Pac's shooting of 2 undercover cops just a month later. Mr. Scarface Part 3, The Final Chapter, flips Ashley's Roach clip by the Soul Searchers. Not sure what it sounds like? Just throw on Eric B. and Rakim's Paid in Full. This first-person perspective from the streets gave listeners who didn't relate to East or West Coast hip-hop, proof that storytelling could encompass different subjects. Not only would he shape Pac's approach, we think Face established himself as the missing link between Rakim and Nas. At just the age of 23, Face Mob was flexing emotional depth through candid and thoroughly constructed storytelling and a discipline that threaded the line between conventional gangster rap and ahead of its time authenticity. Just remember, when you're trying to trace musical lineage, most roots lead back to Brad Jordan. Number 4, the last of a dying breed. We've said it before and we'll say it again. Two things can be true at once. Yes, this is one of Faith's most solid and well-rounded projects to date, but it's also by far his worst album cover. On the contrary to The World Is Yours, The Last of a Dying Breed saw a commercial decline but a critical uptick. We'd argue this album was such a course correction that it directly made The Fix and Faith's Def Jam run possible. Still, 130K with a top 10 debut on the charts isn't bad either. Songs like Sorry For What, They Down With Us, and In It Out make Face's LP one of the smoothest burns of his storied 3-decade career. They Down With Us featuring UGK sees the Rap-A-Lot signees remaking BDP's I'm Still Number One. We get tried and true chemistry with frequent collaborators UGK and JAY-, recurring roles from Too Short and Devin the Dude. There's even a surprise appearance from Redman. The pairing of him and Reggie Nobles is one of hip-hop's more unique crossovers, demonstrating that there is no lane in hip-hop that Face can't cruise in. Brad will return the favor on the song Real Niggas on Redman's Malpractice in May of '01. With unquestionable credibility and an authentically unapologetic nature, Jordan's 6th studio album is nothing short of reinvention. It's funny how rappers have aged with rap. Face was only 30 when he released Dying Breed, but his stature and legacy had him being viewed as an elder statesman around that same age that artists like Hov, Common, and Snoop were just hitting their commercial stride. That shift in age dynamics also poses the question, when was the real birth of grown man rap throughout hip-hop? Grown man rap, in this instance, being mainstream, middle-aged rappers finding success while speaking on subjects that impact the first generation or two of hip-hop listeners. Face might have been rapping about depression and hood equity at the age of 23, but his first project after 40 was 2015's Deeply Rooted. We know there was moderate success past the age of 40 for rappers like LL, Snoop, and Hov, but we definitely wouldn't call it refined rap. Now hip-hop has moved past the perception of rappers automatically aging out after 40. But that's only been possible through the work of Scarface and the artists coming up after him that studied his approach. Shout out to Houston's finest. Number 3, Mr. Scarface is back. Scarface's 1991 resume was as prolific as it was impactful. Releasing We Can't Be Stopped to widespread critical and commercial success, Geto Boys set the stage for groups like UGK and Outkast to advance leaps and bounds. So while we can credit O'Shea for being the first to break out the group mode, Mr. Scarface clearly had a major impact on artists like Bun B, Big Boy, and Tupac. So we had to give Face Mob his flowers just for being the soil hip-hop needed to bloom. In an interview with Unique Access, Face detailed the journey of the album's recording. Handling the majority of the production himself, Jordan would credit Marley Marl and Dr. Dre as heavy influences on the project's sound. When we heard Murder by Reason of Insanity, it just made us want a Face and Bomb Squad collab. You know, just lock Face in the studio with them for an album or 3. Running through the track list, we're surprised how well this one held up over 30 years later. His flow and storytelling on Body Snatchers is criminally underrated. The Pimp does sound a lot like Who's the Mac, but we're not mad at it. Then we get the album's magnum opus and our pick for Brad Jordan's most underrated staple, A Minute to Pray and A Second to Die. That flip of Inner City Blues really did make us want to holler. There have been some comparisons, rightfully so, between Suicidal Thoughts by Notorious B.I.G. and I'm Dead. We've seen a pattern of hip-hop legends dealing away songs they probably should have kept. Some examples that come to mind: Hate It or Love It, we're sure the Massacre would have loved to sport that track. Hov gifting Bleak with Dear Summer. Imagine our surprise when we got Kingdom Come instead. And Jeezy watching Kanye take the hood over with Can't Tell Me Nothing. But apparently Mr. Scarface is Back initially was going to have Mind Playing Tricks on Me. We know it doesn't seem that different. Since like 50, he still appears on the song. While one could still brag about a featured performance, it's nothing like getting that Finals MVP trophy. He even alluded to wanting to remake the timeless classic. If he were to run it back, who should he have featured on the song? It's a cheat code at this point, but Freddie Gibbs would float on that beat. Number 2, The Fix. Tupac and Death Row, Biggie and Bad Boy, Hove and Rockefeller. If you think of one, you're probably associating it with the other. So when we got Face's 7th studio album, seeing a label other than Rap-A-Lot made us do a double take. With features from Hove, Beans, and Faith Evans, Scarface's deal with Def Jam South came with a signing bonus. Being the only rapper in the game capable of pulling off such a feat, Face would also grab Nas in the middle of his beef with Jay for In Between Us. We're not going to talk about that being the weakest beat on the album or the calculated implications of Hove outshining Nas on Face's project. On a side note, we think this is an accurate sample size of their careers on paper. Jay hits a grand slam with Guess Who's Back, and Nas's ear for production leaves him scrambling to keep up. Debuting in the top 5 with over 160,000 copies moved in its first week, The Fix finds a seasoned veteran Scarface tapping into the kind of resources and market he had been influencing but not profiting from for years at this point. Keep Me Down embodies Face's unstoppable ability to call his own shots. I Ain't the One sees the Houston MC floating over Tony Pizarro production like a Cali native. But when we tell you that the beat switch on Heaven is colder than frostbitten ice cream, we're not gassing it. Like we said, we always read the comments. Y'all crucified us in the Jay-Z rank video over that somehow, some way mix up. Man, mistakes happen. One thing that we know for sure, it's never a mistake when Jigga, Face, and Beans link up over Ye production. Songs like My Block, In Cold Blood, Guess Who's Back, and Safe certainly gives our number 1 a run for its money. But the comparison boils down to the difference between a homemade recipe and a mass-produced one. The Fix does a phenomenal job of bringing Face Mob into the mid-2000s, hence the perfect blend of a track like Sellout. The Diary is skip-free, detailed, and organic. If either this or The Diary were to rank atop your list, we wouldn't raise any arguments. Number 1, The Diary. Can we acknowledge how critical casting can be for a project? Cause Cube had Brad locked in on Hand of the Dead Body.
Just come around to where they got me, so you can feel the hand of the dead body.
With the two having mastered such complementary styles of rap, Cube and Face gave us Malone and Stockton flashbacks every time they linked up. We currently got them at 4 collabs. Surprisingly, they've all been on Scarface projects. Peaking at number 2 on the Hot 100, The Diary isn't just a Southern classic, it's one of the greatest albums to emerge from the 90s. End of discussion. Our more well-versed fans know about N.O. Joe's trailblazing efforts to help shape the South through gumbo funk. To those who aren't familiar with Rap-A-Lot's sound and impact, Joe, born Joseph Johnson out of the Big Easy, has fingerprints all over staples like Riding Dirty by UGK, The Resurrection by Geto Boys, and Face's true breakthrough LP, The Diary. We know what you're thinking. How can someone as revered and prolific as 94 Scarface break through on The Diary? Truth be told, calling it a breakthrough would be an understatement. Brad's elevated storytelling, delivery, and subject matter were all Jordan-like. See what we did there? We don't know whether to compare this to art, a time capsule, or both. The production balances the tightrope between innovation and nostalgia, unlike anything else coming out of the South at the time. Hand of the Dead Body and Jesse James are just a handful of Face essentials we get from this project. We'd have to flag our own video if we didn't mention gems like Mind Playing Tricks 94, Going Down, and No Tears. If you've ever wondered what Outkast would have sounded like over Doggy Style production, turn on The White Sheet. Not to mention Face's impact on Gibbs, who would release his own I Seen a Man Die before featuring Jordan on Pinata and Soul sold separately. In hip-hop's expansive and ever-evolving lexicon, words like classic and underrated get thrown around way too much. In Face's case, just off the strength of the LP and its impact on hip-hop 30 years later, we think The Diary has a legitimate case of one of the most underrated albums to come out of the decade as well. It would be one of the few albums to get a perfect score from The Source and Double XL, proof that we should be mentioning The Diary in the same breath of albums like Ready to Die, The Chronic, and Reasonable Doubt. All seminal works that established the footing for their respective regions very early on. Time for the credits. Theorists, we've seen a lot of y'all requesting these legacy artists. Trust, they're all loading as we speak. If you want us to put together some essential playlists, we need you to spread the word. Just remember, every like is a flower. Face already said he doesn't need to be alive to smell his, but we want to give him 1,000 anyway. CJ for CT, signing off.